Welcome to the voice of Alabama politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and I'm joined today by Beth Clayton, attorney at law and Democratic activist.
Hello,
Well,
hello.
You're really more of an operative, aren't you?
I'm whatever you pay me to be.
All right, well,
There you
don't
go.
get paid enough to be much. Then.
That's right.
And Susan Britt, associate editor of APR, producer on this show, and my wife, and very brilliant woman indeed.
Well, thank you, dear.
Yeah, well, I'm prejudiced. I live with you. But
If Mama ain't happy, nobody's happy.
that's
true.
sure. Susan is one of the best researchers in politics
Thank you.
anywhere around.
Thank you.
This past week, there was a big blow up at Lead Academy, which Lead Academy is Montgomery's first charter school, and which it resulted in the principal being fired. Mm-hmm. Now, she had some serious problems with Charlotte Meadows, who's the president of that school, and Charlotte Meadows is the Republican nominee for this district to represent in the State House. And Susan, not only some illegal activities, accused of doing some illegal things, but just some downright stupid stuff going on at Lead Academy, according to people who work there.
Let me put the big one out there. It says just example of the small things going on there. You've got one class of 70 students with one teacher.
That's
All right.
too many.
Now that's not
That's
bad enough.
unsafe.
Well, let's go further. The only room they have big enough for that class is the cafeteria that they can't use because it's a cafeteria. So those students, ever since school started, have had an outdoor classroom and it's 90-degree plus weather.
With one teacher.
With one teacher.
They did tell them that they would get them an assistant as they had, if they could find them.
Yeah, and that was the one they found could only assist maybe 2 times
Now,
a week.
teachers over there
How are they, but I'm sorry, how are they, if they have 70 students outdoors, and I'm assuming these are elementary school age students,
They're
which are-
K through 6.
which are not known for their ability to sit where you put them.
Exactly.
How are they securing these children to make sure that 2 of them don't just wander off somewhere?
That's the exact concern of the teachers.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
And these parents really need to be asking for answers on that. I mean,
Well,
that's
and the other
ridiculous.
thing people don't realize, charter schools are, in fact, they're privately owned, but they're funded by state and federal dollars. So it's our tax dollars going into the school. One of the teacher said there's basically no room to discipline. One teacher was struck
In the face.
by a student, and then they wanted to discipline him, but Charlotte Meadows stepped in and told them they couldn't because
It would be bad PR for the school. So they put the child back in the same classroom with the same teacher he struck.
But isn't a lot of the people that, and I don't have kids anywhere, much less in Montgomery public schools, but I mean, isn't one of the issues that parents in Montgomery have is that Montgomery public schools are not well structured, the students don't have enough discipline, there's a lot of chaos in those schools. So part of the argument for bringing in charter schools was to help provide a choice for parents away from that. It looks like it's just the same song and dance, but funneling some money to Bob Riley instead.
Exactly.
Well, Charlotte Meadows has been a protege of Bob Riley, former
you
Governor
don't
Bob
say.
Riley, and she has been big on pushing for these charter schools. Now she's the head of the board over this charter school. You just have to wonder what happened when Democrats were getting money off schools. The Republicans lost their minds. Are the
We
Republicans?
don't have a Democratic Party to lose its mind. We lost it years ago.
Yeah,
Come
well,
on.
that's true about
Let's
that.
don't forget now, Charlotte Meadows was one of the ones that was in that whole grade fixing thing a few years ago.
She was on the Montgomery School Board.
Question though, would she be affected? And I honestly don't know the answer to this. Would she be affected by the double dipping laws?
Well, that's a question.
That is a good
It
question.
is not, because it's not a state school. That's my
So if
understanding.
a public school teacher runs for the legislature, they have to quit and lose their retirement. But if Charlotte Meadows, the principal of this school, probably making good money doing it,
Well,
runs.
she's over the board. She's the president.
Right. So, but she doesn't have.
Well, she's a Republican.
Oh, they don't have rules. That's right. I forgot.
Anyway, they officially fired Nicole Levy. Ivy.
On Thursday
and,
night.
she's got more to say. The AEA is filing a lawsuit, backing her in a lawsuit.
Right. Well, and Charlotte Meadows also went in or wanted to have Ivy make the teachers sign a right to work
An at-will.
An at-will contract right after school started. Now, this is a time when the teachers couldn't find another job somewhere else because the school year had already started. The contract said that they would be subject to pay decreases if they need to. They would be subject to having to work weekends and overtime and not be compensated for it. And just all this kind of ridiculous wording.
And the thing is, they didn't do that up front, Beth. They did that on the backside.
Right, and I do not practice employment law, so take this opinion as nearly a lay opinion, but it's my understanding that if you're offering new terms of employment, you have to offer some new consideration with that. Otherwise, it's not binding.
Well, evidently they offered the consideration of sign it or be fired. I don't know, but
Yeah, I don't think that counts.
yeah, I don't either. The mayor's race is coming up this coming Tuesday in Montgomery. It's been a heated race in a city that sometimes can be polarized over history. We know it's been polarized by race. This race here for mayor has Stephen Reed, a black man, facing
The son of Joe Reed.
Well, I will get to that. And David Wood, a white guy. And after they clashed and there's a runoff, David Wood basically started a campaign that said, hey, I'm the white guy in this race. Now, the other part of that is what, Beth, you just brought up, that Stephen Reed is the son of Joe Reed, and Joe Reed has a suspect reputation in Montgomery for being a wheeler dealer and a political powerhouse.
Yeah, I don't much care for him. I think the bigger point here, though, is that Stephen Reed's counting his own ballots. And that's something that we really need to look at. I mean, he is the probate judge right now. Probate judge oversees municipal elections. And I think if he wants to move it forward with some degree of transparency to set himself aside from his father, the best thing he could do is step in and ask maybe the Secretary of State or somebody else who has the authority to oversee those elections so that he can show he's not carrying his father's legacy forward.
I think that's a good point.
We got about 10 seconds left. It looks like to me, the polls I've seen, Stephen Reed will
Same thing.
walk this
I think
way.
he's but 23 points ahead?
up.
Yeah.
The people around Stephen Reed assured me that he has kept his father at arm's length and that he will run the city as his own man and not his father's.
I hope so.
I hope so too. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the possibility of a Deep Horizons 2.
The Energy Institute of Alabama promotes reliable, affordable, and clean energy to help grow our economy, create high-paying jobs, and build public support for Alabama's energy industry. The Energy Institute of Alabama is the best source of energy industry information and how it affects households across the state, from convenient energy production to alternative fuels to solar power and beyond.
What are you doing today, babe?
I thought I'd head down to the lake with the guys, do a little fishing. Of course, none of us will be wearing our seatbelts. I'll lose control of the truck, wrap it around a tree, and kill us all.
Okay.
Drive safe, Alabama. A message from your Alabama Department of Transportation.
Hello, I'm William Wyatt Bibb, the first governor of Alabama. On December 14, 1819, Alabama became the 22nd state to enter the Union. This year, we celebrate 200 years of statehood. There is no better way to commemorate our 200th anniversary than by registering to vote and securing your government-issued photo ID. Together, let's make a difference for Alabama.
Back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. Beth, we all still remember the Deepwater Horizons disaster that spilled hundreds of thousands of gallons of oil into the Gulf Coast.
It was devastating
Yeah.
to the Gulf economy.
Yeah, it was. And hurt the entire Gulf and hurt businesses throughout Alabama, Mississippi.
And let's not forget, 11 people died during that explosion.
Yeah. Well, there were rules put in place after that that established certain procedures, certain way that things had to be maintained. There had to be certain pieces, valves put in place and inspected on a regular basis. That was under the Obama administration. Under the new administration, those have not been totally rolled back, but what they've done is they've instituted waivers. And now a group has brought a lawsuit that says these new waivers could lead us and will lead us to another Deepwater Horizons oil spill.
Right. I mean, it's entirely possible. And I mean, if you look through, I know I'm a liberal, so I'm over here, loving regulations and stuff. But if you listen to the conservative viewpoint, they say businesses should be able to, make these decisions, and the free market will hold them accountable. But the fact is, some of these companies are just too big to be held accountable by the free market. 'Cause it's less expensive for them to just break the law and pay the fine than it is to actually comply with the law. And so I think what the Trump administration's doing in implementing these waivers is making it where they can check off and say, oh, we've done this or that to make sure that we're being compliant, but they're not actually protecting the people that they say they're going to protect. And if you look at any of the regulations throughout history that have come into the business world, whether it's, you have sweatshops on fire in the 20s and children dying and all of these things, it's there because there was a disaster and somebody said we can't let that happen again. So I think it's petty partisan politics if we're going to roll back these very valid rules.
And you said, that this is a liberal standpoint of regulations. This is just common sense. This
Right.
is not liberal. It's not conservative. It's common sense. When it's what's called a blowout preventer, that's what failed during the Deepwater Horizon. Okay, so it had not been tested in 5 years, and that happened. Last time it was tested was 2005. The blowout came in 2010. Now, after that, they said, okay, the Obama administration said these need to be tested on a regular basis. They're not doing that anymore. They rolled it back where they're not actually testing, and we're talking about a PSI here of 20,000 plus. We're talking about some really heavy-duty pressure.
I think the thing that I would like to add to that particular conversation is that we know that oil in the water is bad. It's bad bad for fishing, bad for tourism. It's bad for life. And so we want to stop those from happening. Now, we can say these rollbacks, though, are really more in the sense of waivers. It's not that everybody gets to do it. It's that if you come to the government and you say, I don't want to have to do this, or I don't want to have to do that. They say, well, okay, you don't have to do it. But they don't, it's not blanket that everybody has to do it, right?
Right. So it's even worse. If you hire the right lobbyists, you don't have to do it. That means.
Speaking
Well,
of
there you go.
lobbyists, when our reporter Eddie Burkhalter broke this story this week, and immediately the Department of Interior called and said, oh, no, you've got all this wrong. They don't have to use waivers now if they have, let me get it right, alternative procedures or equipment, otherwise known as a workaround, a regulation.
Yeah, right. So if I don't want to use this valve, this thing, I can use an inferior one because it's cheaper. But again, the thing is here, like you said, we need to use common sense when it comes to environmental issues, and dumping hundreds of millions of gallons of oil in the Gulf is bad for business.
Right. And
It is bad
not
for
to mention
business.
we've just spent how much money on the Mobile port.
Yep.
Trying to make
Yep.
sure that it's deeper so we can handle more business coming through. What would it do to business if we had another spill like
No,
this?
bad oil spill, bad for business. Clean water, good for business.
Now, I understand they're about to put another rig out there built by the same company as Horizons was built by, and it really hasn't been thoroughly tested yet. From my understanding, they were kind of just going to put it out there and see if it blows up.
Well, they're going to go deep. They're going to go deeper. That's what they're going to do, and we'll find out. But again, there's a lawsuit that's saying that they should not be allowed to do this. We'll see how it plays out in court. Something odd happened on the way to Sunday school last week.
Yeah.
We were looking into an appointment in Hale County. In Hale County, the Ivey administration appointed a woman named Rosie Lyles to be on the board of registrars. So we looked up Mrs. Lyles, and lo and behold,
Just like a simple Google search, right?
The
Like
first-
no like mystery.
first Google search turned up that Ms. Lyles, back in the early 2000s, was charged with 6 counts of voter fraud.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought only the Democrats were doing the voter fraud, though, right? So they're.
Apparently,
She was a Democrat.
Oh, that makes sense. Well, I mean, but seriously though, guys, I mean, if we want to sit here and talk about election integrity, we can't have the fox guard in the hen house. I mean, if you get charged even with voter fraud, I mean, it's my understanding she pled down to something
she
else.
did.
But still, I'm sorry, no, you can't sit there.
Here's the kicker. We call the Secretary of State's office, and because it wasn't something to do with moral turpitude, there's no law that says if you've even been convicted of voter fraud, you can't be a registrar.
So
It's not there.
Governor Ivey's office said that
Common sense, Susan.
Governor,
Still appoint 'em.
Governor Ivey's office said they had become aware of it after Ms. Lyles was appointed.
Did they
and-
not Google it?
No, they didn't.
No, and they actually said they didn't do background checks for low-level things like this. It's the voter.
Yeah.
It's the voter. As I think John Archibald said on Twitter, he said, in this state, we don't, people that commit voter fraud, we place them in charge of voting. That's the reward for cheating, is you get to be in charge.
Let's cheat better and don't get caught, guys. Come on. I mean, Lord.
But anyway, it's just one of those instances where you go, only in Alabama.
And when you hear it, you go, did I just hear that?
Yeah, exactly.
She couldn't have just said that, really.
Yeah, all right. Well, she did.
Not her fault.
If you're
Just the
worried
law.
about voting, go to Hell County. We'll be right back. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics.
Hey, I'm Jamie Johnson. When we reach the age of 18, voting becomes our civic duty. But what if it was our job? We wouldn't be so quick to call in sick or go back home if the lines were too long, or just dismiss the idea altogether. Elections are also how we collectively write the song that tells our story, and voting is our solitary voice. So register to vote and go get your government-issued photo ID and add your voice to the song of Alabama.
What a great opportunity for your success.
Adding 500,000 highly skilled employees to our workforce by 2025 is how we stay ahead in Alabama. Our economy is stronger than it's been in years, and a skilled workforce is more important than ever. Things move fast, so choose your path. Your success is waiting, plus a great future for Alabama. Success Plus. Go for it.
Hey man, what are you doing today?
Play the game. Thought I'd go out for a drive later, maybe. Text some friends while I'm doing it. Scroll through social media. Kill a family 4 and a head on collision.
Cool, man.
Drive safe, Alabama. A message from your Alabama Department of Transportation.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. The country is greatly divided over impeachment, and we are not going to get an agreement right now from liberals and conservatives or even moderates.
Anyone.
No one has total agreement here. What we have looked at over at APR is what are the mechanics of impeachment? The founding generation, when they wrote the Constitution, put in the documentation that the president, the vice president, and certain federal officials
like judges
should be impeached if they commit acts of treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors. There is a process prescribed by the Constitution. And that is where we are in an impeachment. The first part of an impeachment involves basically making an accusation. We're not even there yet. But the first fundamental thing is that the Congress, the House, looks at evidence, makes an accusation of wrongdoing. There have been 9 federal judges removed from office through the impeachment process. But Beth, the first thing that has to happen is the House has to look at it, and then it goes to the Senate. Kind of take us through that a little bit.
Right. So the first thing that's going to happen is someone in the House will say, I have a problem, and they'll raise their hand and they'll say, I want to discuss impeachment. And then they will present sort of their case for what they think is going on. And then the House will vote whether or not there is sufficient information for it to move forward. And at the point when the House votes, it just has to be a simple majority. So 218, I think, is 435 divided by 2. That when that vote takes place, now you say the president has been impeached in the sense that they're not removed from office.
Right.
They're just, it goes to the Senate, and then the Senate is the trier of fact in sense of the, president or whoever the elected official is who is under impeachment. It behaves much like a criminal court, but it's not a criminal court. The impeaching party puts on their side, the defendant puts on their side, and then the Senate votes to decide whether or not there's sufficient evidence to remove this person from office.
And that's simply, the impeachment process is not a punishment.
No.
It is not a criminal trial. It involves removing someone from office. And this was what the framers of the Constitution argued for. In 1787, James Madison at the Constitutional Convention argued that presidents and vice presidents should be able to be impeached, but that the primary way we should remove them from office is through elections. But he argued that if their conduct became fatal to the Constitution or fatal to the Republic, I think is the way he put it, then they should be removed from office early. And Susan, they use a phrase, we understand what bribery is, we understand what treason is. Where it gets a little murky is what is a high crime and misdemeanor. And that's been set through precedent and historical reference to it. So kind of give us your interpretation.
Yeah, they're very, very specific, in the Constitution, very specific what bribery is. Very specific what treason is, and that's really written out. High crimes and misdemeanors, not so much. That's kind of a vague area. High crime basically means a crime committed or alleged crime committed in a higher office. Misdemeanors we think of as, small level crimes, like not paying a parking ticket or whatever. That's not what the framers meant. That it doesn't have really to do with a crime itself. It has to do with more of a misdeed.
Right.
In other words, if someone, and I believe a judge has been removed for this, an elected official refused to show up for work for 6 months.
Right.
Well, you can't have that elected, you can't wait for an election, for 4 years to have
a federal judge has a lifetime appointment.
Right.
So you have to impeach him to
exactly,
get it.
You have to.
And
that's kind of the sense of what that means there.
Well, that's sort of a dereliction of duty.
Exactly.
When we tangle up misdemeanors in the high crimes and misdemeanor sense with misdemeanors and the felonies and misdemeanors
Exactly.
sense, but really it's more of like when you think about in a corporation, if you have an officer, they can be removed for like misfeasance, malfeasance, nonfeasance, all of the feasances. It's kind of that category of you have an oath of office and what have you done with your oath of office.
And so the here and why that's important is because so many people are saying, well, he didn't commit a crime, so we shouldn't have impeachment. Well, yeah, because the Constitution says that even in malfeasance, showing up to work drunk or whatever, can start that process.
Right, and that this is what they've decided that. The Congress has broad latitude. And again, if you think of it as a misdeed or a dereliction of duty or not honoring your oath of office, those would all fit under the category of what these constitutional lawyers and all have in the past prescribed. And that's the process. Now, if there was a crime committed, the crime would be prosecuted by the Department of Justice. Again, impeachment is not about punishing someone for a crime. It's removal from office because there were accusations that were accepted by the Senate And that's how we get there. It's pretty simple.
Now, something important in that if you think back previously in other administrations, whatever, the actual beginning of the process does not mean that it will ultimately end in impeachment.
No.
This could stop at any point. There could be, the Senate could decide not to take it up, which I understand they're probably going to do. But there's any number of places that this can stop in the process without actually removing him from
Again,
office.
I am not interested in talking about what this group or that group will do in this process, because it is way above what we normally do. What I want people to understand is we've had House members say that you have to have committed a crime. Not true. The actual from the Senate, from the Congressional Resources Group says finding that impeachable offense need not be limited to criminal conduct. That was issued in a case against Walter Nixon in '89. He was a judge.
Well, and I think you make a good point. Not how we got a little bit of time left, but in the sense of what we are seeing, though, is politicians on both sides are using this to fundraise and to spread misinformation.
Absolutely.
Yes, they are.
And I would just encourage the public to get the facts about what this actually means.
Absolutely. And I think that's important. Well, we had some sad news over the last 2 weeks. Congressman Jack Edwards, he was retired from Mobile. He passed away, as did Representative Pete Turnham, who was a state representative for many years. They will both be missed.
War Eagle, Representative Turnham.
All right. Well, you've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. You watch us because we watch them.